Hey guys, welcome to Your Bible Questions Answered. You might be wondering, wait a second, that looks like a very different kind of background. And to be fair, it is. But there's some work going on in my house studio. And I figured since it's quite noisy, I'll just come out here. I'm in the garden. The little bunny is dancing around my feet, so that's kind of cute. But I'm still looking forward to getting into your questions as always. And I just want to remind you, if you ever want to check out this book, Corrupting the Image 2, I think it's one of my best books. I did some really heavy research in that. I did Sumerian and Akkadian original language research. You can check that out. Also, Corrupting the Image 3. Super excited about this book as well. Guys, I think you're going to love them. Now, I'm a little biased. I don't deny that. But I also think you're going to love them because the things that the Lord has kept showing me were so exciting. And I can hardly wait till you get to check those out. All right. Well, let's go to our text and see if we can't get into today's questions. Okay. So we have, hold on, let me put the camera. Sorry about that. Working on it. All right. There we go. Cool. All right. There I am. All right. So fantastic. So our first question. This is from Brian. In the context of the second coming, do you see this taking place more near a matter of days or a longer period? For example, pre-wrath teachers see the second coming as more extended than, say, a 24-hour day. Yeah, Brian, I tend to agree with that. I do think the day of the Lord is the second. I mean, the second coming is the day of the Lord, which I think is a day, right? I think that will be the day of trumpets when Jesus comes back. But I actually think there's going to be probably a 10-day period that will be happening between the time of Jesus coming and the second coming. Why 10 days? Because, well, one, it says that Satan will throw you into tribulation for 10 days. That's interesting. Secondly, between trumpets and the feast of Yom Kippur, right, the Day of Atonement, there are 10 days in there. And when Jesus comes back, I don't think that it's just over like that. I think that he is going to do things in real time. Now, we know he's God, right? He could snap his big fingers and everybody falls dead, right? He could just, and everyone's dead. But that's not really how he works, you know? So that's why I think that it quite likely will be a few days. And the Battle of Armageddon is a huge event, right? And that's not going to just take place in a couple hours. That's gonna happen. Probably it'll be several days. So if you're interested in Corrupting the Image 3, I go into all kinds of detail explaining that, right? So this book right here, Corrupting the Image 3, Singularity, Superhumans, and the Second Coming of Jesus. I got really excited about that because the way I was taught about the second coming is, well, of course, I was a pre-trib rapturist at that time. And so I just heard, well, we get raptured and then there's 7 ugly years and then Jesus comes back. Yeah, there's this battle and then it's over. You know, it was very cookie cutter, very plain Jane. And when you really start to look into what the Bible has to say about that, there's tons of information about this topic. I mean, that's what makes it so exciting, is that there's really a lot of detail. Yeah, it took a long time to put all the details together, but it sure was fun. So I think you'll have a great time. And just to let you guys know, I am still working on the Regenesis book. That is where I'm going to take all of my research, Corrupting the Image 1, 2, and 3, and eventually 4, and I'm co-authoring with a guy. We're making a fictional trilogy, maybe a 4-part series. We'll have to wait and see. But I want this to be something that you can pick it up, you can read it like, wow, like that blew my mind, right? Not just in an academic sense, but it's good entertainment. But it's all very well researched. Okay, in my humble opinion. Okay, all right. Let's get to another question here. All right, this is from Diana. What are your thoughts about Hanukkah? I know the feast of dedication that Yeshua attended in John 10 was a commemoration of the dedication of the first temple, first held by Solomon in 1 Kings chapter 8. Although the Maccabean revolt, Apocrypha, did not actually occur per Josephus, or did actually occur. The story of the 8 days when the oil that didn't run out seems to be a Pharisaical falsehood. So how should we correctly celebrate the feast of dedication, if at all? Well, Diana, that's a great question. I enjoy celebrating the feast of Hanukkah. I think it's really a nice feast. We know that, as you pointed out, Jesus was celebrating that. We don't know if he celebrated it for 8 days, right? There's no evidence in the New Testament, right? But to be honest, the only biblical text that talks about celebrating Hanukkah is the book of John, right? So that's kind of interesting. That's probably the earliest source that we have. Now, they did that they celebrated for 8 days is in the book of Maccabees, right? This was supposed to be something that they would set up and they would celebrate. The real question is about the oil. And I think you're right that there's no old source talking about that oil lasting for 8 days, right? That's the miracle that we don't really have any evidence that it happened. So here's my viewpoint on this whole thing. I think it's a very nice holiday. I think it's worth remembering what happened during the Maccabean revolt. I think that it is very good to spend time and, lighting candles, the menorah, right, which becomes the Hanukkah. I think it's fantastic, and that little bit of mythology that's thrown in there about the oil lasting 8 days, it doesn't bother me too much. Right. And of course, we don't know absolutely. I think it's probably fiction, but we don't know absolutely. The earliest source seems to be from a much, much later rabbinic source. So I wouldn't quite say the Pharisees, but of course, the Pharisees became the rabbis. I'm sure you know that. So, there's something to be said for that. But I guess, I don't know, why not just enjoy it? That's my take on it. So thanks for the great question. All right. She's got another question. How do you feel about wearing or displaying of crosses? It seems that although the practice of crucifixion predates Yeshua, the first century Romans did indeed execute convicted criminals, specifically on Tavs, as sacrifices to their god Mithra, aka Tammuz, hence the Tav. Okay, maybe. I know the word stauros in Greek and etz Hebrew can mean any wooden object, such as a cross, stake, or even a tree. Cursed is the one who hangs on a tree, but the etymology of the very word crucifixion literally and specifically means to fix a cross. Do you believe that Yeshua was crucified on a literal cross? And what does that say about the cross as a symbol of remembrance? All right. So, yeah, on the one hand, I don't think it makes a radical difference whether he was crucified on a torture stake or a cross. Now, having said that, I think he was crucified on a cross. Okay. Like this kind of thing. Okay. Now, or whatever. That thing, right? The typical standard cross that we often think about with its cross beam, right? That's what I'm trying to get at. So I do not agree with the Jehovah's Witnesses and others who make a big deal about the staron, the torture stake. Again, I don't think that it makes a huge difference, but it is just one of those things. And we have lots of evidence. I mean, there's just a plethora of evidence that the Romans were doing this. And yeah, Jesus was not the first to die on a cross. There were thousands and thousands and thousands of people, probably, tens or hundreds of thousands that were crucified over the course of the Roman Empire. And they did it all over the place, right? And, so it was not just Jesus by any means. I mean, there were 900 Pharisees who were crucified, some 50 to 60 years before Jesus, even maybe a little bit before that, right? 900, right? So again, this was not a new thing that started with Jesus, and he was the only one to ever die on a cross. Now, I think his crucifixion is radically important, obviously, but it was not unique in that sense. It was hardly unique. So, to take something that obviously meant death and meant pain, and then to use that as a remembrance or as sort of as a symbol of, hey, this is something that I do. I don't think there's any problem with that. Now, the difference between a cross and a crucifixion, at least in the minds of a lot of evangelical Christians, is that, let's say the Catholics, they have a crucifixion, whereas they leave Jesus on the cross, right? And in the Protestant evangelical tradition, the cross is empty because Jesus came down from the cross and he rose. Okay. Now, that may be splitting hairs. I try not to judge somebody who's wearing a cross. I personally don't want to wear a cross. Not that I'm not against it philosophically. I'm not really into chains and anything anyway. So that's one thing to consider. But I would rather my life be seen through my conduct than through my wearing of different things. So I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but I choose not to do it. And so that's a very, subjective and kind of personal question, but I hope that gives you something to think about. All right, this is from Iris. Iris says, is the new covenant completely fulfilled or partially, meaning does it completely become fulfilled when we inherit the new Jerusalem? Well, Iris, I think, I kind of would liken it to the marriage, okay, where, you can get legally married with somebody and it's not until the consummation, right, that you're really officially technically married, okay, even though you did all the paperwork, you said I do's, and you may now kiss the bride and all that stuff, and so for thousands of years the marriage was not legit until there was an actual consummation. So I think that we are in that time, since we're talking about getting married to Jesus, right? That's what we're talking about here. The new covenant is a marriage contract, and right now we're entering into that betrothal phase where we say, I do. We promise to be faithful to the Lord until he comes back, right? We're not going to go after other gods, for example. We're going to stay true to him. That's the basic idea. And so on the one hand, it's legit. It's legal. It's binding. On the other hand, there's still something that is yet to be done, right? There's still that sort of consummation phase. And until the Lord comes and takes us to be with him, then we can't really say it's over, right? Or that it's absolutely complete. All right. That was a very, really thoughtful question. All right. This is from Diana. Was Melchizedek a Christophany? Some say that it was Shem. I think that's from Jasher. I've heard it said that he was even Adam, who could possibly still have been living in Abraham's day and having no earthly mother or father, but that would explain if he was indeed a Christophany. What do you see? So I'm not of the opinion that Melchizedek was Christ, right? My opinion is that Melchizedek was a regular human person. Now, he was a special human person, right? Having said he's regular, he was special for sure because of the whole interaction between him and Abraham. And in Psalm 110, I think it talks about how you are of the order of Melchizedek. So I don't think you can be of the order of Melchizedek if you are Melchizedek, right? So that would be my only, well, I don't know if it's my only one, but it's definitely something that I would say that makes me scratch my head and say, all right. So I think Melchizedek is a shadow. He's a type. I don't think that was Jesus in the flesh. Could I be wrong? Of course I could. But obviously I hold the opinion that I do. And so I think I'm right, but we'll have to wait and see, whether it was Shem, I think it's really speculation when we come down to those kinds of ideas, because we don't have enough to go on. Could it have been Shem? Maybe. Could it have been Adam? I don't think so. We're told that Adam died, right? 930 years. Just look it up, right? It's in the book of Genesis, right? He died. So I don't know where people could make that kind of claim that it was Adam. Was it this? Well, never mind. Forget that. But I think Melchizedek was just a guy who was a high priest of the Most High. He was not of the Aaronic order because he wasn't Aaron, but he was Melchizedek, right? He was the king of righteousness, Melchizedek, right? And Melchizedek doesn't necessarily mean that he has to be divine. Could he have been? Of course, right? A lot of things are possible. I just am of the opinion that it was not Jesus. But obviously, there are a lot of my colleagues who would see that differently. So that's my opinion on that one. All right, this is from Robert. He says, how do we tell the difference between biblical taboo, having multiple wives, incest, and biblical law? Okay, that is an interesting question. Well, yeah. That's where I would probably turn to Jesus, right? So, Jesus said, okay, yeah, things were permitted, but they were not exactly the way God intended, right? So in the beginning, a man will cleave to his wife, not to his wives, right? So that's something to consider. As far as incest, it does become law, but later it becomes law in Leviticus chapter 18, right? And we're told very, very clearly what different parties can have sexual relations and which cannot, right? So anybody who is close of kin, you're not allowed to do that. So that it did become law. Now, this is, of course, where a lot of skeptics like to say, well, yeah, but what about, back in the day? Well, look, I mean, no matter how you look at it, no matter how you slice this, even if you're a staunch evolutionist and you think that we evolved from monkeys, at some point, a brother and sister had to have sexual relations to get the whole thing going, right? So the difference here, and if we take a look at the Bible, is that when God created Adam and Eve, he created them perfectly, genetically perfectly. That means they had all their information. They weren't lacking anything. They didn't lose any data. Everything was there. Now, as the generations went on, there was a loss of information, so that the closer you were to your next of kin, the more likely you were to pass on what would normally be recessive traits into your offspring, right? And if those recessive traits are deleterious, then that child is more likely to have problems, right? So I think God had to finally step in and say, okay, we're at a place genetically where, brothers and sisters cannot be doing this. So, and this is really tricky, and I want to make this super abundantly clear, okay, because I know someone's going to take me out of context. I'm even reticent to say it, okay? But there was nothing morally wrong with Adam's immediate kids having relations with one another, right? If it was a committed relationship. But genetically, as the centuries went on, the millennia went on, okay? And after then, of course, Noah and his 3 sons. Now we have this kind of bottleneck, and then we're starting over. So whatever was inherent in Noah's family, that's kind of what we got stuck with. And then God then says, okay, you should not have relations with your close of kin. So it's not a moral issue. This is a genetic issue that we're talking about. And are there huge taboos against having relations with your next of kin? Yes. Should there be? Yes. Okay. I'm absolutely against brothers and sisters and first cousins and all that stuff getting married, because not morally, but genetically, right? So there should be a huge taboo against it, because it leads to bad offspring. It leads to offspring that have a much higher likelihood of having genetic problems than somebody who is far away from you. Okay, so I hope that's clear. All right, if somebody's listening to this and like, oh, Doug just said blah blah, please go back and listen to it, what I said, okay? Because I can imagine someone's going to run with this and start misquoting me. All right, let's get to our next question. All right, this is from Jan. I know God is the creator and sovereign over all, but why is he so cryptic about things? All right, interesting. Well, is God cryptic? And of course, sadly, your question's a little bit cryptic, Jan, because I'm going to have to guess a little bit of what you're trying to say. On the one hand, I kind of get what you're saying. I get where you're coming from, right? Why didn't God just spell things out? And there's definitely times that I wish God would have just spelled it out to the nth degree. However, I would say that as we continue to study the Word, things become clearer. And sometimes God doesn't give us a list of yes versus no, but he gives us principles. And the principles are what guides us. Those are the things that guide us through a lot of life's different scenarios, right? It's not always going to be on the list. Like, what do I do in this situation? It's not always on the list. You have to go back to the principles, right? And so if that's what you mean by cryptic, then I think that's probably what we're getting at. The other thing, again, trying to read a little bit into your question, I would suggest that we Christians often think God is cryptic because we don't spend a lot of time or enough time in the first 5 books, right? Those are the foundation. And when you really have a good foundation in those foundational books, then things seem less cryptic. But to be fair, I've asked the same question. Lord, why didn't you just spell it out, right? Well, I'm not God, so I can't tell you maybe what his motives were. But I think the more we study it, the more things really do come into focus. All right, this is from Courtney. This is, let's see. Courtney suggests to read Matthew 7. Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and it will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives, and he who seeks finds, and to him who knocks it will be opened. Interesting. All right. She says Jesus also said before that, do not give what is holy to the dogs, nor cast your pearls before swine, lest they trample them under their feet and turn and tear you in pieces. So I think that's good advice there. Thank you for that, Courtney. That's good stuff. All right. Getting to our another question here. Maybe I missed this one, perhaps. This is from Sean. Do you believe Leviathan and Behemoth were real? All right. Well, let's go there. We haven't actually taken a deep dive in a text, so I want to take a look at Job chapter 39. Fantastic passage. All right, so we're looking here at Behemoth. All right. Chapter 40. Sorry, my bad. All right, so yeah, where were you when I created? Goodness, my memory's failing me. Let's see. I thought it was right there, but apparently I'm quite off. I really thought I had this figured out. All right. Well, there's Leviathan. Where'd Behemoth go? Anyway, Leviathan and Behemoth. I don't know. Anyway, Leviathan. All right. So this is a very, very interesting creature. I do think this was real, right? First of all, God says, can you draw out Leviathan with a hook or snare his tongue with a line which you lower? Can you put a reed through his nose or pierce his jaw with a hook? Will he make any supplication for you? Will he speak softly to you? No, right? So all this, you're going to be really sad that you messed with this guy. And God seems kind of proud of him, right? No one is so fierce that he would dare stir him up. Who then is able to stand against me? Who has preceded me that I should pay him? Everything under heaven is mine. I will not conceal his limbs. His mighty power, his graceful proportions. Who can remove his outer coat? Who can approach him with a double bridle? Who can open the doors of his face with his terrible teeth all around? His rows of scales are his pride, shut up tightly, as are the seal. One is so near another that no air can come between them. Look, if this is not real, and I'm not sharing with you guys, sorry about that. But so this is here in the book of Job. We're looking at chapter 41. The way that God is describing this being does not sound like a spiritual being. It does not sound like Satan to me. This sounds like a real fleshly, air breathing kind of creature, right? And what's amazing here is it says that his sneezings flash forth light, and his eyes are like the eyelids of the morning. Out of his mouth go burning lights, sparks of fire shoot out. Smoke goes out of his nostrils as from a boiling pot, and burning rushes. His breath kindles coals. A flame goes out of his mouth, right? This is not your average creature. We don't see this creature. So far as I know, this creature is not existing today on the planet. I've never come across this. Maybe it's in some deep, dark jungle somewhere, but I've never run into this creature, and I'm really happy about that, actually. So I do think it was real, and I think the behemoth was real as well. So behemoth probably was a sauropod dinosaur. He had a tail that was 40 feet long. We know that the Diplodocus, which is a type of sauropod dinosaur, had a tail that was 40 feet long. So I think the description of the behemoth fits incredibly well with a sauropod dinosaur. And of course, this would suggest that the dinosaurs and man lived together, which, a lot of science tells us that was absolutely impossible. Well, I don't have time to get into all of that, but I do think that these creatures were absolutely real. And I think probably you had little baby dinosaurs that were on the boat, or maybe even eggs that were on Noah's Ark, and then when they got off, they of course they grew, and then as the climate changed, a lot of them died out. Maybe they became food for some people, and they eventually they died out. So that's what I would suggest. Obviously, the vast majority died in the flood, right? So that's, I think, quite obvious. But and remember that a lot of things changed. The conditions of life changed after the flood. There's evidence to suggest, according to Dr. John Baumgartner, that there was tremendous volcanic activity during the time of the flood. And if that's the case, well, volcanic activity releases a lot of radiation. And so radiation is going to greatly decrease the lifespan of humans. It's going to make things look like they're decaying much faster, because they, of course, than they are. But what's happened is a lot of evolutionists will turn to the uniformitarian perspective, and they say, well, what we see today is the way things have always been. But we don't know that. We do not know what the decay rate was like early on. And what the Bible tells us is that the decay rate was much, much, much slower. That's why people were living 900 and some years. That means the animals would have lived a lot longer as well. And of course, the dinosaurs would have had more time to grow bigger. So in, these kind of still rather Edenic conditions, you got lots of light, you got lots of moisture, lots of greenery all over the place. And, people and animals are living much longer lives than they would have grown to enormous size. Because the interesting thing about reptiles is that they never stop growing. So before the flood, those dinosaurs, that we call them, they could have become these terrible lizards, right? They were lizards that became quite terrible. And probably a lot of those lizards, even their very species is no longer around. They went extinct when the flood happened. And then other species continued to live on. They were better suited for a colder climate, or for just the way the world is today, right? Sometimes a dry climate, etc. All right, that was a fun question. This is from Jonathan. What does it mean to afflict your souls in Leviticus 20 through 27? It doesn't mention fasting. Jonathan, you're absolutely right. However, in I believe it is Psalm 34, it talks about how you're to fast and afflict your soul. And so that is why the rabbis for a very, very long time have well understood that the day of Yom Kippur, where you're supposed to afflict your soul, is related to fasting. So I don't think that's like the maximum you have to do. You can do more if you want. You can afflict your soul even more, but that seems to be the minimum. And I think for most people, not eating for a day is well, that's afflicting our soul, right? It's not very fun. It's not pretty, right? I mean, it's not terrible. You'll be okay, really. I do it every year, and I'm so glad I do it. I really enjoy fasting. Well, I wouldn't say I enjoy fasting, but I'm glad that I fast on Yom Kippur because it really helps me to think about what is important, think about who I'm serving, and just be cognizant of where I've blown it during the year. So it's fantastic. And then as I think about Jesus going into the Holy of Holies, taking his blood that he offered on the heavenly altar, right? That's the day that I really focus on that. I think about it throughout the year, of course, but that day I think even more about that very important topic. All right, and the last one here, what will believers be doing during the millennium? Well, Jesus tells us that we are going to be ruling and reigning with him, right? We see that in Revelation chapter 20, that we're going to rule and reign with him. He talks about the 12 tribes, or the 12 apostles are going to be ruling over Israel, right? So there will be a whole economy that will be happening. And, again, Jesus could just do everything himself, but that is really not his MO. He likes to raise up leaders and to train us and to equip us and to make us leaders. So, there's going to be a lot of time to do that. We'll have new bodies, so I'm looking forward to that. But I don't think we're going to have all knowledge, as far as I can tell. In other words, we're not going to have, God's knowledge, but we will probably be in the semblance of an angel. And so then we will have brains that will no longer forget things. And then we will begin that incredible time of learning of all that there is to know. And well, there's an infinite amount of what there is to know. So it'll take us quite a while to figure that out, which is good news because we won't get bored. All right. Let me turn to some other questions here. And this is coming to us from the chat. So if you're watching this right now, you're wondering, how do I submit a question? When this goes on live, you can submit a question in the chat. If you want to submit something through the app, you can do that. The Way Congregation. It's in the Apple or Google Play Store. You can get it there. The Way Congregation. And I take those questions first. Very good. Let's see here. This is a question from Tick. Didn't Nabonidus take the Babylonian moon star religion to Arabia? Interesting. Islam conquered Rome and conquered his space until 1923. That made way for the Jews to return. Yes. Well, okay. So Nabonidus was the father-in-law of Nebuchadnezzar, and he was an interesting guy. He was co-regent. Let's see, not Nebuchadnezzar, but he was co-regent, with Belshazzar. There we go. My bad. He was co-regent with Belshazzar, and he was actually an archaeologist, which is really interesting, right? So he spent a lot of time doing archaeological digs, which seems crazy to us, right? Because he was an old, guy who lived a long time ago, and now we're digging up stuff about him. But that's what he did kind of as a pastime. So whether he took the moon star religion to Arabia, I've not heard that. It's not impossible, but we do know that the whole moon star religion came from Babylonia, obviously, and then it was exported to a lot of parts in the world. But I'm not aware if he was personally responsible for that. I would suggest that's probably late. So I would think that it would have happened much earlier, but I'm not sure. So it's entirely possible. All right. So follow-up question here. A mystery religion that wasn't around when he got the vision. He was a false prophet and is trying to revive in Syria now. Okay. Not sure what to do with that, but thank you for that. Okay. Looks like there's a discussion going on here. That's fantastic. Glad. So if you guys do have a question, if you would put a Q in front of it so I know that you're talking to me, and not exciting, not about something else. Here's a comment from Elizabeth Farah. Your novel sounds exciting. A correction for Left Behind. Well, I hope so. I certainly don't want to throw them under the bus. They did quite well, and they sold 65 million books. I'll be excited if I can do something close to that. But yeah, I think I would, certainly disagree with some of the theology in Left Behind. And I think this is going to be, I think it's going to be popular. So I can hardly wait till I get it out. So keep praying for me, working on it, working hard, and we'll definitely get it there. So, all right. All right, good. Here's a question. Tidal asks, you mentioned that Isaiah 14 refers to Satan. When did Satan die? And when was he cast out of his grave per Isaiah 14:19? Ooh, I like it. Okay. This is a great question. Let's go there. Isaiah 14:19. All right. So let's go back up just a little bit. All right. So let's check this out. How you fallen from heaven. Oh, Halel is the actual Hebrew right here. Oh, Halel. Let me pull that up in the Hebrew. All right. How you're fallen from heaven. Halel, right? So that right there is Enlil. Okay. And I talk about that in Corrupting Image 2 a lot. For you've said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. All right. But so yet or but. So here's the word right? So that basically means but or yet. You shall be brought down to Sheol, to the lowest depths of the pit. Well, the answer to your question is rather simple. He hasn't died yet. All right. He has not been brought down to the grave, but he will be. Okay. You will be brought down. You shall be brought down to Sheol, to the lowest depths of the pit. Now, the word there for pit is the word bor, right? And the word bor in Greek is Hades. And where is Satan going to be thrown into for 1,000 years? All right, this is your do. All right, you get to think about that for a second. Answer or question. All right, I probably wouldn't be very good at Jeopardy. But, the answer here is that he's going to be thrown into the abyss or into the bor for 1,000 years. So Isaiah 14:19 has not happened yet. You're absolutely right on that. It's not happened. He hasn't died, but he is going to be thrown into the abyss, into Hades, at the time of the second coming, right? So when the millennium begins, that is when Satan will be thrown out, and he'll be stuck there. Okay, so for 1,000 years, then he gets to come back, sadly. But I'm hoping to write Corrupting Image 4, and I hope to answer that question in great detail. Okay, this is from Martina. How do you feel about head coverings? Well, Martina, I feel okay about head coverings. Now, if you're asking, do I think an external, scarf is necessary on the head, I'm not of that persuasion. What I see Paul talking about there in 2 Corinthians chapter 11, I believe it is, I see it as hair. Okay, so let's go there. I think that deserves our time to look at that. So 2 Corinthians 11. Hopefully I got the right passage here. Let's see. It's one that I always think I'm going to remember, and then I don't. Oh boy. Well, if you guys can always give me the, if you can give me the address, it definitely saves me a lot of time, so I don't have to look for it, because I don't remember everything, sadly. Oh, there's a lot of things that I don't remember, which kind of bugs me a lot. I wish I could remember everything, but I don't. All right, well, let's look it up. So this is because of angels. All right. Oh, there it was. Well, I got that totally wrong. I was off by a whole book. Oh, well, that's how it goes, right? All right, so let's take a look here. And I blew that one. I'm really bummed. All right, so this is about head coverings. Now, let's take a look at what these head coverings are all about. Okay, so keep the traditions just as I delivered them to you, that the head of every man is Christ. So, what is the head covering of a human, a guy? Christ. The head of the woman is man, right? Her husband. And the head of Christ is God. So, apparently, Jesus has a head covering, but I don't think Jesus has a bandana on. All right, for every man praying or prophesying, having his head covered, dishonors his head. But every woman who prays or prophesies with her head uncovers dishonors her head, for that is one and the same as if her head were shaved. For if a woman is not covered, let her also be shorn, for it is shameful for a woman to be shorn or shaved, let her be covered. For a man indeed ought not to cover his head, since he is the image and glory of God, but the woman is the glory of man. For man is not from woman, but woman from man. Nor was man created for the woman, but woman for the man. For this reason, woman ought to have a symbol of authority on her head. Nevertheless, neither is man independent of woman, nor woman independent of man in the Lord. For as woman came from man, so even so man also comes through woman. But all things are from God. All right, judge among yourselves if it is proper for a woman to pray to God with her head uncovered. Does not even nature itself teach you that if a man has long hair, it's a dishonor to him? But if a woman has long hair, it is a glory to her, for her hair is given to her for a covering. All right, so there it is. Okay, verse 15, her hair is given. Let me just pull that up just so you guys can see that. I know my face was blocking that. I want you to see that. So that is my answer to your question. Now, obviously, other people would disagree with that. And if there are women, I know many, who choose to wear a head covering, you know, I'm not going to say anything. You know, that's obviously your choice. That's your conviction. But the way that I read that passage is that the head covering of a woman is, in fact, her hair. So I don't believe that there's any need or requirement to wear anything else on the head. So that's my opinion. Okay, you can take that one or leave that. All right. This is from Rodney. Isn't there Jewish tradition that Abram spent time learning from Shem and Noah before destroying his father's idols? Well, yes, there is. Certainly the book of Jasher. I am not a big fan of the book of Jasher. I think what we have in the book of Jasher is probably the book of Jasher, the one that we have. I don't put any faith in it. I think that it is a very, very late, I won't say forgery, but it's just made up. But in the Midrash, we do have things that Noah, that Abram destroyed his father's idols. Whether he was learning from Shem, I don't believe that's in the Jewish Midrash, but I would have to double check on that. So, yeah, okay. Here's a question from David. If Yeshua is the image of Adonai, isn't a crucifix a graven image of God? Well, that's probably why in the evangelical Christian Protestant tradition, we typically do not have Jesus on the cross, right? Because that is, we wouldn't want to come near that. So, whether somebody's worshiping that or if it's a memorial, I think that might be perhaps splitting hairs. So I don't know. I mean, in that case, we probably wouldn't want to have any movies depicting Jesus, right? I mean, I think we can take this to a different level, and I'm not sure that that's necessarily, I don't know that's necessarily what we're supposed to glean from that. Okay, some more interesting conversations. All right, that is good. And since I'm almost out of time anyway, here's a question from Lenny. Why does Jesus tell us not to fear when that's mentioned in prophecy is pretty frightening? Oh, yeah. That's a good question. What we see in prophecy is very frightening. But um, the command, really, it's a command. It's certainly an exhortation, but it's also a command to not be afraid. Because what is the enemy's greatest weapon? Fear, right? And when you really can't do something to somebody, then what do you use? You use fear, intimidation. So the enemy is going to use lots and lots of intimidation. And quite frankly, the things that he throws at us seem really scary. And I get it why people are fearful, because I'm often fearful, right? But of course, what I'm trying to learn as I'm walking with the Lord is to not be afraid. So when we're really in tune with God, we're not afraid. What could Peter do when he was not afraid? He could walk on water. But then he looked around, he became fearful, and he doubted, and down he went. So we're not supposed to be fearful, because when we're not fearful, then we start to operate at this whole other level. And boy, I'm not there yet, but I'm working to get there. I want to get there. And I think it's possible to get there. But fear is definitely a big part of that. And I'm going to have a chapter on fear in my new book, Rethinking Prayer. Working on that one as fast as I can as well. So give me time. I'm really trying. Okay. Somebody says the Day of Atonement is easier for us than going to the temple, smelling rusting flesh all the time. So there you are. That's true. Very good. All right. This is from CZ. Someone has said to me the other day that God stopped creating angels. Is that biblical? Well, it's probably true, but I don't know of any place in Scripture where it says that God stopped making angels. We know that He created them when He spoke them into existence, and when we look at the order from Psalm 148, it strongly implies, we can at least infer, that He's probably not making any more. So Psalm 148, let me try that again. Psalm 148. All right. Praise the Lord from the heavens, right? So that's the first thing, heavens. Okay. Praise Him in the heights. So God first made the heavens and the earth. Praise Him, all His angels. Okay, that's the next thing. Praise Him, sun and moon. All right. So sun and moon are day 4, right? The heavens are what? Well, that's day 1, right? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, right? So somewhere between day 1 and day 4, if we take this as in order, and we're not absolutely certain that we ought to do that, but I think it's a fair assumption that somewhere between day 1 and day 4, God created the angels. How did He do it? That's the really cool thing. Well, like the other things, He spoke. Let them praise the Lord, for He commanded, and they were created. He also established them forever and ever. He made a decree which shall not pass away. So God made a command. He spoke, and these things, including the angels and the host, the army of angels, also came into existence. So we're told approximately when they're created, but we're not specifically told that God stopped creating them. But I suspect that He probably stopped creating them. So I don't know how else to prove that, but that's probably the case. So Rodney says he didn't know I had an app. Yeah, I hope you check that out. It's the Way Congregation app. I love it. I listen to the audio Bible every night, practically. Well, not every night, but almost every night. Okay. I just love it. So check it out. It's free. It's got a lot of great stuff on there. All right. CZ asks, was the angel to human ratio a lot higher back in the day? I don't know. That's about all I can tell you. Okay. Michael asks, nice, easy question. Is divorce a sin? Wow. Okay. Well, no, divorce is not a sin. Who got divorced? Somebody really important. Somebody creator-like. Well, the creator. Okay. God got divorced. Okay. Let's take a look at that in Jeremiah chapter 3. So, if a man divorces his wife and she goes from him, becomes another man's, may he return to her again? Would not the land be greatly polluted? But you played the harlot with many lovers. Yet return to me, says the Lord. All right, so he's talking to the northern kingdom, or the southern kingdom of Judah, excuse me. He then goes on to explain some of the bad things that they did. Okay, and then he talks about backsliding Israel. Remember that the United Kingdom has been split into two: the southern kingdom of Judah and the northern kingdom of Israel. All right. So, have you seen what backsliding Israel has done? So we're talking about the northern kingdom. She's gone up on every high mountain, on every green tree, and there played the harlot. Why was she playing a harlot? Well, she was supposed to be married to God, right? She was supposed to be married to God, but she went after all these others. And I said, after she had done all these things, return to me, right? Shuvi alai. But she did not return. And her treacherous sister Judah saw it. So that's the southern kingdom. Judah saw it, and then they did bad stuff. Okay, so, and then it says, then I saw that for all the causes for which backsliding Israel had committed adultery, again, adultery means what? That they were married. She committed adultery. I had put her away and given her a certificate of divorce. So, wow. God gave the northern kingdom a certificate of divorce. Yet our treacherous sister Judah did not fear, but went and played the harlot also. Wow. Well, a lot more could be said about that. I did a whole video, God's divorce and remarriage. I encourage you guys to check that out, since I'm almost out of time here. God's divorce and remarriage, that is here on my YouTube channel. So just put that in the search, and I go into lots and lots of detail about that. So no, divorce is not a sin. Now, adultery is a sin, right? So adultery, where two people are married and then they go and are with a different partner while married. Okay, that's a sin. And the remedy, well, divorce. Okay, so yeah, it's a good question. All right. This is from CZ. Could you please give a brief recap about what you were saying, the difference between Hades, Sheol, the abyss, etc.? Who's in where? Is anyone in Hades now? All right. Well, the people that are in Hades now, well, the entities that are in Hades now, are the 200 angels that came down in the days of Jared. These are the angels that did not keep their first estate. You can check that out in Jude 1 verses 6 and 7, right? Also 2 Peter 2. Hope I quoted that right. All right. So those angels who were naughty in those days, that's putting it nicely, but they were naughty and they did not keep their proper estate. God cast them down into a place known as Tartarus. Tartarus is the lowest rung of this place called Hades. Now, Tartarus and Hades are both Greek words, right? So in the Greek tradition and the Greek language, that's how you'd explain that. In Hebrew, the equivalent of Hades and Tartarus are Sheol, right? Sheol is just the grave, and it's also known as the Bor, Habor. Habor means pit, right? So Joseph was thrown into a pit. Interesting, right? And that's presumably, well, that's what I believe, is that Jesus himself went down into the pit, right? He went down into Sheol, and there he put those naughty angels on notice that he was going to take the keys of death and Hades back, right? So, yeah, so I would say that the bad angels are definitely in Hades now, or Sheol. The unrighteous people who died, who were antagonistic against God, whatever term you want to use, unsaved, if you want to use that term, then I would suggest that they are in that place as well. All right. All right. Very good. And let's see here. All right. Looks like another question from Tidal. Isn't it true that Adam was already going to die before he ate from the knowledge of good and evil? As Yahweh Elohim said, Adam needed to be kicked out before he ate life and lived forever. No, I don't think so. So I think he had the potential to die before he ate of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and he then exercised that option. However, had he not eaten from that tree, I think he would have lived, you know, hundreds, thousands of years. Okay. However, he would have still been in a non-sealed state. Okay. And I know this gets a little bit weird, but um, in other words, he didn't have to die. He could have gone on living in that innocent state. We know the choice he made, of course, but um, he when he took of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and he ate from that, something happened to him spiritually and physically that caused him to die. I would argue that he lost the Holy Spirit the moment that he ate of that fruit, and he died spiritually right then and there. And then maybe that fruit had some bad thing in it, and poison, I don't know. But by ingesting that then caused a chain reaction throughout all of his molecules and his DNA, etc., to then begin to die. There's even a record of this in the man's Y chromosome. And it was two evolutionists who pointed this out, right? So this was Thompson and Bradman, I think it was. And in their paper, YY, the evolution of the Y chromosome, they talk about that every man has a copy of Adam's Y chromosome, and that original Y chromosome has a record of an event. Now, they don't specifically state this, but my inference from what they're saying is that the record of the event, I should say, is the fall. And the record is that we've now lost information in that Y chromosome. Maybe I'm answering more than you asked. So, all right. All right. If a man and a woman choose to not get the government involved, do you think God would still consider it a marriage if they make vows to each other and to God, still having a pastor do the ceremony? Boy, I'm tempted not to ask this. I answered a question similar a couple years ago, and everybody got mad at me. But look, the bottom line, the government is not required, right? Why does the government, the state, get involved? I think there's a reason, okay? And I think it's a good reason, because it's a protection, right? Because if things go south and then suddenly you have to split ways, well, then there's going to be a lawsuit, and you then have to divide up things. So by doing it under that protection in the first place, you then have the protection later on if things don't turn out properly. Okay. However, in God's eyes, you don't need a state issued decree to say now you are officially married. But I think there's some wisdom in that. So I wouldn't throw that out too quick. All right. I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. Obviously, Adam and Eve got married, and they didn't have any state paper, and people for a long time were getting married, but they did have witnesses, right? So the community recognized that they were a thing. Okay. And so that's all that's happening in our day, is that the community, this is the official community, the one that's on record, is also recognizing that you're a thing, right? So, I've heard people say, "Oh, I don't need that," and I understand to a certain spiritual level you don't. But I would encourage people to, not throw the baby out with the bathwater just too quick, all right? Because it's for the protection of both parties, and sometimes especially the woman, so that there's evidence that you really are together. All right, this is from Jason. Can you define uncover thy father's nakedness? Noah was kindled to great anger. It seems that it was more to it than this. Yeah, I would agree with you. I don't think that his son saw him in his skivvies. I don't think that's what we're talking about here. I just don't think that was an issue. I don't know. I mean, people that play sports, a lot of times, right? They'll take big community showers, and I don't think that was the issue. And had Noah's son's been in there seeing him take a shower, oh my gosh, we saw him. I think it has nothing to do with that. And I think the answer lies in Leviticus 18, where it says you shall not uncover the nakedness of your mother, of your father, of your sister, right? In other words, you're not supposed to have sexual relations with that person. So my take on it is that by uncovering Noah's nakedness, I think what happened is that Ham took advantage of his mother sexually. Bad idea. But probably in the same general vein as what Reuben did when he took his father's concubine, right? I don't think that, well, I don't want to get graphic, but I don't think there was any physical attraction, but I think there was a sense of, I'm going to be the leader now, and I'm going to take this woman as my own to show my dominance in this family, right? And I think that would explain why Canaan was cursed. It's not that, here comes Canaan and Noah says, you know what, I'm going to curse you because I don't like you. I don't think that's the case. We don't even see that Ham is cursed, but Canaan is cursed because of what Ham did, which wasn't just seeing his dad in his undies or without any undies, but he had relations with Noah's wife, his mother. Bad idea, very bad idea. And as a result, she got pregnant, and then out comes Canaan. And because that was a forbidden relationship, now you have a child who is cursed because of how he was conceived. All right. That was an interesting question. All right, man, I'm out of time, guys, so don't ask anymore. I'll try to get to the rest here. All right, question from Tyler. Why does the Bible state why God makes twins? Why two or more of the same identity? I don't know that it says why he does that. I would suggest that's not necessarily a God did this type thing, but that God created the world, and this is something that happens when there's conception, right? Sometimes this happens. So I don't know that it's necessarily God directing that. He might on some occasions. I'm not saying he doesn't or he can't. I just don't know that every time we have twins that this is God necessarily putting his finger on that. I think a lot of things that happen in the world are just because God sort of wound it up and now it's happening, right? And there's things happen, right? God always has the option to intervene and to steer things in the direction he wants them to go. So I'm not saying that some twins may not be of God's doing, but I don't necessarily think that all twins are necessarily of God doing something. Okay. All right. So this is from Santi Barajas. Can you explain Malachi 2:16 regarding divorce, please? Sure. All right. So Malachi 2:16. Why did it come up Matthew? I don't know. Malachi 2:16. I'm still getting Matthew. Malachi. Maybe I'm typing wrong. I don't know. There we go. All right. So let's take a look at this in the Hebrew. Ki saneh shalach amar Adonai. All right. So this is a tricky one. Now, the New King James says, for the Lord God of Israel says that he hates divorce. All right. Well, I think the way that's translated could absolutely be true. I don't think God likes divorce. And when God divorced Israel, he wasn't excited about it. Okay. But, there's definitely different ways to look at this passage. I want to go to the New English translation. So they've got this big, long note, okay? So Saneh appears to be a third-person form he hates, okay? That's significant. God's not saying that I hate, but it says that he hates, which makes little sense in the context unless one amends the following word to a third-person verb as well. Then one might translate, he who hates his wife and divorces her is guilty of violence. Okay, so that is certainly a possibility. Okay, so there's a lot that could be said about this, but yeah, it really, even, if we kind of wrestle with the translation, it doesn't change the bottom line. God is not excited about divorce, not at all. But we know that God gave that as an option. He gave it in Deuteronomy 24. And right, so if a man has a wife, let's go there. Let's just take a look, because I think this probably deserves a little bit more time to understand this. All right, I'll go back to my familiar New King James. When a man takes a wife and marries her, and it happens that she finds no favor in his eyes because he has found some uncleanness in her, and writes her a certificate of divorce, puts it in her hand, and sends her out of his house, when she's departed from his house and goes becomes another man's wife, if the latter husband detests her and writes her a certificate of divorce, puts it in her hand, and sends her out of his house, or if the latter husband dies who took her as his wife, then the former husband who divorced her must not take her back to be his wife after she's been defiled. That's an abomination before the Lord. All right. So, again, God is not excited about divorce, but God permitted it. And God himself even exercised this option. Now, what's so interesting is that the only way, because we read in Hosea that God says, I'm not your husband, you're not my wife, I'm not your God, you're not my people, get out. But he says, but one day, he's talking to the northern kingdom of Israel, one day I'll betroth you to me in righteousness. So how is he going to do this? How can he, on the one hand, divorce her, and then she's with all these other gods, and then how can he say, I'm going to take you back? Because his very word says can't do that. So the only solution was for Jesus, the husband, to die. And when he did that, the first marriage contract was dissolved, gone. It's wonderful. It's beautiful. Now, I know we're not necessarily talking about that. All right. So when Jesus was asked about this, it says, can a man send his wife away for any reason? And no, all right, you can't. And if you look carefully, the word there in Greek is apoluo, talking about sending away. What did we just read in the text? Right? So if a man writes her a certificate of divorce and does what? Sends her out of his house. So there were two parts to this. There was the divorce certificate. That was critically important, so that the wife or the woman could remarry, right? And I'm blanking. I'm trying to think the guy who wrote a really good book on this. Oh, bummer. It'll come to me in a minute. But it'll come to me in a minute. But anyway, so there were two parts. There had to be a certificate and then a sending away. So what Jesus is talking about in Matthew chapter 5 and Matthew chapter 19 is that if there's a sending away and there's not a certificate, then the woman that was sent away, because she doesn't have the certificate, is still officially married to the guy that sent her away. And then if she becomes another man's, then that's adultery. So the solution is you must have a certificate of divorce, right? And these certificates were ubiquitous in the first century. Something that was given out, gave it to the woman. It says, with this, you can remarry. All right, so that is a lot of what we're getting at there. All right, good. I think I got that one. All right, don't ask any more. Anything after 6 o'clock, I'm not taking. So, for Doug, what does it mean in Revelation when it says that some will be saved from the temptation, the hour of temptation, or the hour of trial? Well, probably just that some won't have to go through that. Others will have to go through that. So I hope that answers it pretty much. Okay. Boy, I just can't even ignore this one. If there are no female angels, then where do females go when they die? Do they go to heaven, or are they kept somewhere else because of temptation of the angels? What I'm reading here in the chat is that passage is probably talking about, the angels and don't tempt the angels. I was leaning into that interpretation some years ago, but I don't really think that is the interpretation. If you want to check out my series on Corinthians, 1 Corinthians. You can certainly do that here on my YouTube channel. I've got a whole playlist on that whole thing. So that would be 1 Corinthians, not 2nd, but 1 Corinthians chapter 11, if you want to learn more about that. So you respectfully disagree, that's fine. And you're certainly entitled to that position. So, okay. Fantastic. Thank you, guys. This was great. If I did not get to your question, put it in the app and I'll get to it next week. Or if you are the first one on, you can always get here early on Tuesdays and I'll take your questions. Looking forward to it. Thanks again. It's always wonderful. If you want to help support this ministry, you can go to patreon.com/Doug Hamp, and you can give as little as $2 a month, or you can give to your heart's content, right? As whatever you want to give. It really does help. Thank you. I am blessed by it, and keeps the lights on and all that amazing stuff. So thank you, guys. Join me tomorrow night. I'm going to be doing the Midrash, right? Going through the virtual Midrash. So join me here at 7 p.m. Mountain Time. Thursday, we are going to have Nelson Walters on. So that should be a fantastic thing. We're going to talk about the prophetic future fulfillment of the Sabbaths and the appointed times. It's going to be interesting. It may not sound interesting, but it's going to be awesome. It's going to be great. And then, of course, on Shabbat, I will be back in the book of Judges. Looking forward to that. And boy, what a mess that book. But definitely interesting. Okay, till next time.